This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Do you ever feel like kids media is too high energy, too loud, too bright, not British enough? Well, have I got this series for you. Kipper the Dog. Kipper the Dog is a children's franchise with an animated show and a series of picture books. This is gonna sound silly, but Kipper is a big part of my family. My brother is autistic, and his big thing has always been the Wiggles. And the company that did the DVD and VHS releases for the Wiggles also made Kipper. So we also got very into Kipper. Not as much as the Wiggles, but we quote Kipper all the time. It's one of the things I'm most nostalgic towards. So today, I'd like to explore the world of Kipper the Dog. Kipper started with a series of picture books by Mick Inkpen. Mick Inkpen is his real name. He said in an interview, yes, it was his given name, and that apart from definitely being his most frequently asked question, it roughly translates from the Anglo-Saxon and Celtic as Bog Hill. It's still a very funny name for a writer/illustrator. It's like if my name was Sarah Talkspeak, you'd be like, that's ironic, given, you know. I will say, researching Mick Inkpen was difficult. He doesn't do a lot of interviews. He said in an interview that he doesn't like doing public appearances. I think he's just not interested in being a public figure. He doesn't even have like a Facebook page or a personal website, which I think every author and artist I've talked about on this channel has had a website. Even I have a website, which, speaking of my website, I made it with the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. So I have a degree in graphic design, and I took a website coding class out of sort of a sense of obligation, like, I guess I should try doing this, right? And I did not like it. I passed the class. I got the degree. I know you were all very worried, but I was like, I never want to code a website again. Luckily, we live in the future. You can build a beautiful website with Squarespace without even knowing what CSS is. What a blissful existence that would be. Squarespace has fully customizable templates that are super easy. I didn't need a tutorial. I didn't need to look anything up. I just jumped right in and it went super smoothly. I was very impressed by their design tools. They have custom color palettes, an image asset library, built-in photo editing, and Google and Typekit fonts. So I was able to use the official sans serif font combo, which, if you were wondering, is Bookman JF and Degular. You can use Squarespace to manage your online presence, whether it's a personal blog like mine, or a portfolio or an online shop. You can sell products on your website or even content like subscriptions. And Squarespace Payments allows you to manage your payments. If any of that interests you, you can go to squarespace.com for a free trial, play around a little bit, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/sarahserif to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So even though Mick Inkpen didn't have a website, I persevered with my research. He began his career as a graphic designer, just like me. And then this is when Nick Butterworth comes into the story. It sounds like I'm making these names up. I'm not. I think that's just how everyone in England is named. So Nick Butterworth had a graphic design studio with his friends. It was named after their last names, so Baxter, Butterworth, and Cope, affectionately known to our clients as the BBC. Ha ha ha. So Mick knew Nick's brother. Nope. So Nick knew Mick's brother. I'm gonna have to really enunciate. If I say Butterworth knew Inkpen's brother, then that sounds like I'm doing a nursery rhyme. You won't be able to take me seriously. Well, I mean, other than that. Okay. Nick Butterworth heard from Mick Inkpen's brother John that Mick was a really good artist. And so Baxter, Butterworth, and Cope took him on as a junior in their studio. I had no formal training, Mick Inkpen said. I was offered a place at Cambridge to study English, but spent a gap year working on Nick's graphic design studio and decided to stay on. And then Mick Inkpen and Nick Butterworth worked on a cartoon strip. It was called Upney Junction, about mice in a deserted railway station, and it was published in the Sunday Express. Inkpen explains, most often when we worked together, I'd write, Nick would draw, and I'd come back into color. And then later, Mick and Nick worked on a Sunday morning kids show called Rub-a-Dub-Tub. Nick Butterworth had come across a children's magazine created by Anne Wood, and at this point, Anne Wood was the producer for The Book Tower, a show on Yorkshire television. And so Nick Butterworth was like, hey, maybe Anne Wood would be an opportunity for me to get Upney Junction on TV. I cold called Anne and was amazed by the response. She said she had seen and liked my nursery rhyme book and that she had had a note to herself on her desk. Nick Butterworth, television. And then Anne had recently been appointed producer of children's programs on TV-AM, and she met with Nick Butterworth in a hotel in London. She apparently said, "If I gave you 1,000,000 children on a Sunday morning, what would you do with them?" Which I think is a really interesting way to think about children's programming. Like, if you had an audience of children, what would you do? Like, how would you entertain them or educate them? I feel like more and more nowadays, the attitude towards children's programming is just like, get them to shut up for an hour, you know? Like iPad baby content. But I think what we show children is so important, and it always makes me very happy when people think it should be something of value. That's why I like highlighting thoughtful children's programming on this channel. So apparently when asked this question, Nick Butterworth gave some like panicked answer, but I guess it was good enough. So Nick and Mick brainstormed what they would do with their Rub-a-Dub time slot. Rub-a-Dub-Tub was a variety show, so they only had to fill one little segment. And they came up with a very simple and very low budget idea. Nick Butterworth would tell a story direct to camera with illustrations on an easel next to him, and he would add to the drawings as he spoke. All of the stories were about a character named Steve. We invented a young boy who would feature in a story every week in a different occupation.
This week, Steve is a vet. Steve had a busy day ahead of him. The waiting room was already full, and first in line was a boy with a python.
Nick Butterworth said, "Mick wrote most of the stories. We produced the illustrations together, but with key parts left blank. This was so that when I told the stories direct to camera, I could draw in the missing elements to complete the pictures. It was a bit hairy because it was recorded as live. There was very little in the way of editing facilities for children's programs at TV-AM. We had prepared 2 sets of drawings. If I mucked up after that, well, one of the takes had to be used."
Tricky drawing a box from this angle.
Rub-a-Dub-Tub only lasted from 1983 to 1984. My understanding is that TV-AM had a lot of problems in its early years. So this was a short-lived gig for Nick and Mick, but it was so random I had to talk about it. Also, side note, Anne Wood went on to create Teletubbies. Good for her. Then, in 1989, Nick and Mick each published picture books that were massive for their careers. Nick Butterworth published One Snowy Night, which was the first in his series Percy the Park Keeper. I had never heard of Percy the Park Keeper before this, but apparently it's quite popular, especially in England. Meanwhile, Mick Inkpen published The Blue Balloon, which is technically the first Kipper book. But in The Blue Balloon, Kipper is the pet of a little boy, and he's also walking on 4 legs. So a more traditional dog, and not like an anthropomorphic, independent dog, as he will be later on. So it's like kind of Kipper. He's named Kipper, he sort of looks like Kipper, but not quite. The plot of The Blue Balloon is that Kipper finds a soggy balloon in the backyard, and the little boy takes it and blows it up, and it turns out to be a special balloon. When you blow it up, it stretches and gets bigger and bigger forever and doesn't pop, and it's also indestructible. You can hit it or stretch it, and the balloon stays intact and doesn't pop. It also makes the boy fly. And at the end of the book, the blue balloon folds out into a rainbow balloon. Mick Inkpen said, "He wanted a subject with universal appeal, and a simple balloon seemed perfect. Balloons are essentially happy, celebratory things. They cost very little, yet they possess personality. They are by turn floaty, farty, bouncy, and explodey. And like us, they grow wrinkly and expire." The book uses the word indestructible, which is quite a big word for a picture book. Mick Inkpen was worried that it was too long for a children's book, but he felt that very young children would probably enjoy getting their tongues around 1 or 2 difficult words, provided they weren't bombarded with them. The book also has interactive elements that fold out. So there's a massive fold out page when the balloon is being blown up. There's a little fold out when the balloon stretches, things like that. Mick Inkpen said, "I began to wonder if it might be possible for the balloon to escape the boundaries of the book itself. I had no idea at all how much the decision to experiment with the physical form of the book affected the difficulty and cost of making it, until my publisher took me to Italy to see its production. The whole print shop had been reconfigured with a long line of machines, all but one of which were responsible not for printing, but for putting the book together." I think the publisher was like, "You need to appreciate how much work this is for me." But this paid off, and the book was a huge hit. Mick says that he finally felt like a real author with The Blue Balloon. "It was a tremendous boost of encouragement that affirmed what I had dared to suspect, that I was capable of making picture books that children would want to read. It was probably the most exciting moment in my career. From that year on, I did think of myself as a bona fide children's author."
The most exciting moment in my career was seeing piles of The Blue Balloon in the bookshops. Before that, typical with a lot of other authors, you'd go into a bookshop and you'd hunt for your book, and as a fledgling author you may find one poor spine looking out at you. But when it got to The Blue Balloon, as I say, there were piles on the gondolas in the middle of the store, and that was really, really exciting.
And then the publisher asked for a follow-up to The Blue Balloon. Mick said he knew that publishers seek repeat success, and that what repeats best is character. And so he wanted a character that he could turn into a series of books. And his wife, Debbie, suggested that he use Kipper. Weirdly, it meant that I didn't love Kipper as much for the first 2 or 3 years as I would have done had he been a more spontaneous creation. But I came to love him a lot. Then I began to apply some of that playful creativity to the Kipper books, so I did come to enjoy doing the Kipper books, but it was a very different kind of birth, the first Kipper. The first Kipper book came out in 1991. In it, Kipper is unhappy with his bed, so he goes to a bunch of different animals to see how they get comfortable. None of them work for him, so he goes back to his bed in the end. Mick thinks that Kipper is relatable to kids. He does the same playful, silly things that they do, but at the same time, he exists outside of the limitations of childhood. Kipper doesn't have parents, so he doesn't have to ask permission for anything. He has the freedom to do whatever he wants. That freedom is very attractive for young children who themselves constantly rehearse growing up. The fact that he exists in the white world of the page itself rather than in a fully realized location or exact point in time allows these different kinds of reality to coexist without contradicting each other. That mix is very close to the way children use their own imaginations when playing. What he said about the white world of the page is referring to the fact that Kipper doesn't really have backgrounds. There's a lot of negative space, a lot of white space. We only really get settings or objects if Kipper is interacting with them. It's an art style that really makes Kipper the focus of these books. Kipper was successful, and after that there were a lot of Kipper books. Then, in 1997, Kipper got a TV adaptation. It was produced by Hit Entertainment.
Kipper the dog, now on home video from your friends at Hit Entertainment.
Which I've talked about them before on this channel in the Angelina Ballerina video. Hit Entertainment began as Henson International Television. It was the international distribution arm of the Jim Henson Company. And then when the Jim Henson Company merged with Disney, Hit Entertainment broke off into its own company. Hit Entertainment acquired the distribution rights for a lot of existing programming, and they started producing their own original programming. So they produced Angelina Ballerina, and they were in charge of home video releases for The Wiggles. Also, in 1996, Hit Entertainment produced a Percy the Park Keeper show. Nick and Mick have such intertwined careers. Almost the same year, they each got Hit Entertainment adaptations of their popular picture book series, which also began the same year. Mick Inkpen was positive about the process of making the Kipper show with Hit Entertainment. "I'd resisted TV for ages because it takes a huge amount of material to fill the schedules, and this is often at the expense of the quality. But it's actually been a happy relationship with Hit, who produced the films, and Grand Slam, who made them. There was no attempt to sideline me, and I started off heavily involved during the first year. I wrote the initial series, edited the rest, worked with the storyboarder and director to establish the style of the films. And he also tried out over 20 writers to put a successful team together. In total, the Kipper the Dog TV show has 78 10-minute episodes. The show aired on CITV in the UK and in the US on Nick Jr. and PBS Kids Sprout. The show is the cutest thing ever. Sorry if you thought I was going to be impartial about this. I am not. The show follows Kipper, who is an orange dog based on a Jack Russell Terrier. Kipper is very sweet and helpful, and he also loves to have fun. Kipper is voiced by Martin Clunes. Mick Inkpen got to pick Martin Clunes to be the voice of Kipper. Martin Clunes starred on the TV show Doc Martin, where he plays a curmudgeonly doctor.
Did you wash your hands?
No.
Oh, well, goodness gracious, maybe there's a link.
Your grandma probably watches it. I think he does a great job. He gives Kipper this very gentle voice that sounds very sweet and soothing.
You can do a roly-poly. You're so clever.
10 out of 10 Kipper performance. Then Kipper has a few friends. The cast of the show is very limited, so there's not that many of them. First, there's Tiger. Tiger is a grey Scottish Terrier, but when I was a kid, I thought he was a cat. First of all, he has pointy ears. I know that some dogs have pointy ears, but on the flip side, all cats have pointy ears. And then also, his name is Tiger, which is a cat. So I definitely thought he was a cat for like all of my childhood. Tiger has a smug, know-it-all attitude. He's also kind of bossy. And he's also more nervous and scared than Kipper. Tiger is voiced by Chris Lang. Basically every non-Kipper character is voiced by Chris Lang. Maybe they just wanted to save money on voice actors. I don't know. I definitely didn't notice that when I was a kid. I think he does a good job making all the characters sound different. But rewatching it now that I know that, I can hear it. I don't even think Chris Lang does voice acting anymore. He seems to be like a screenwriter now, which like good for him. I support his career change. Then there's Pig, who's kind of greedy and silly. And Pig has a little cousin named Arnold. Arnold is very young, so he doesn't speak, and he mostly just sucks his thumb, but he's very clever. Then there's Jake, who's like an English sheepdog. He's very sweet, but he's also not in a lot of episodes. The theme song is iconic.
They call him Kipper. Kipper the dog. The dog with the slipper. That's Kipper. Kipper the dog. By the way, that's a toad, not a frog.
It's very jazzy, and the lyrics are very silly. The show's music in general is fantastic. It's by Bob Heatley. Now let's talk about some of my favorite episodes. The Visitor. There's a thunderstorm in the middle of the night and a baby goose lands on Kipper's windowsill. So he lets the baby goose inside, and there's various baby goose antics. Kipper lets the goose play in his bathtub, and he puts his rubber duck in there, and the goose hates the rubber duck and tries to attack it. The goose eats some cornflakes and makes a big mess, and so Kipper is vacuuming them up, and he thinks that he vacuumed up the goose. Then Kipper reads the goose a story about baby animals, and there's a page with a goose and a gosling. And Kipper's like, oh, that's how you got here. You and your goose family were flying in the storm and you got lost. And so he takes the goose to the window so that the goose can fly back. Pig's present. Pig is having a birthday party, and he sends out invitations to everyone. Of note, he sends out an invitation to a character named Holly, who is never seen in the show, but she's notable for being a girl character. In the invitations, Pig requests some sort of pet as his gift.
Here is my present list. 1. A pet, like a rabbit or a guinea pig or something. 2. A little mouse or a gerbil or something. 3. Anything else. But mostly I would like number 1 or number 2.
And so Kipper goes to the pet store and he buys a hamster. And Kipper immediately falls in love with this hamster. He names it Roly because it can do a roly-poly. And as he's wrapping the hamster's cage, Roly goes into the wrapping paper tube. And so Kipper gets distracted, making a giant obstacle course for Roly. He got so distracted that he missed the entire party.
You're the best birthday present ever. Birthday present? Birthday party.
So he has to run to Pig's house with Rolly. And it turns out Pig has received every other pet from the pet store. And Pig is like, well, could you do me a favor and keep Rolly and take care of him for me? Because Pig is in a little over his head with all these pets. The bleepers. Kipper is playing on Big Hill with his remote-controlled truck. And then a flying saucer comes and lands on Big Hill. And these bleeper people come out of the spaceship. But they accidentally knock one of the legs of the spaceship, so it falls over and they can't get it right side up again. Kipper offers the bleeper people a lollipop, and the bleeper people are like, Ladle Parsh?
Lollipops.
Little posh.
Lol-e-pops.
Little posh. Little posh.
And so we, exclusively in my house, refer to lollipops as Ladle Parsh. The bleeper people do not like the lollipops, but they do like the sticks and the wrappers. Then Kipper has the bright idea to use his remote-controlled tow truck to pull the spaceship right side over. Then the big mommy spaceship comes to take the bleeper people away, and Kipper gives them a flower.
Little posh.
Tiger's torch. Tiger has gotten a flashlight, or if you're British, a torch, and he wants to show off to Kipper how bright it is. So they go under the blankets and look at Kipper's storybook. And there's a running bit in this episode where they keep starting the story in the storybook, but then cutting each other off.
Deep in the middle of the dark, dark wood, there lived a horrible, horrendous, terrible, tremendous...
That's it. We'll camp in the woods tonight.
Deep in the middle of the dark, dark wood, there lived a horrible, horrendous, terrible, tremendous, which is to me an iconic Kipper quote. In order to fully enjoy this new torch, they decide to go camping. But Tiger is instantly scared being in the woods in the dark. They hear a noise outside of their tent and go to investigate and drop the torch. And then the torch projects a shadow of a snail onto the tent, and Tiger's freaking out. And then Kipper goes and realizes, oh, it's just a snail. The goldfish. Kipper finds a goldfish in a puddle, and he carries it to Tiger's house. Tiger is going on holiday, so he has all of his beach stuff all over the place. Kipper puts the goldfish in Tiger's bucket, but Tiger's like, oh, I need that bucket. I can't go on holiday without it. So Kipper's like, oh, I could put the goldfish in your goldfish bowl. And Tiger's like, no, I have a tadpole in there. And Kipper is about to say, oh, don't you know that a tadpole is a baby frog? But he gets cut off. Tiger gives him a bag to carry the goldfish home in. And Kipper puts the goldfish in increasingly large containers, but the goldfish never seems happy, and so he decides to release the goldfish into the pond.
This is where you belong. Not in a puddle, not in a jam jar, and not in my bath.
Then Tiger gets home from his holiday, and the tadpole is gone because it had turned into a frog and hopped away. And Kipper explains that a tadpole is a baby frog, and Tiger does not believe him and laughs at him.
A frog with a wiggly tail? Oh, Kipper, don't you know anything?
A frog with a wiggly tail? Oh, Kipper, don't you know anything? I mean, in a lot of the episodes, Tiger is quite rude. Hiccups. Kipper gets the hiccups, and he tries a bunch of different remedies to get rid of them, including standing on his head and singing a song.
I don't want to have the hiccups. Hiccups, you must go.
In my house, we sing this song every time anyone gets the hiccups. I mean, it's not much of a song, but, you know. In the end, all of his friends come and scare him, and that gets rid of the hiccups. The little ghost. A ghost has been sent to haunt Kipper, but he's not a very scary ghost. I'm mainly bringing up this episode because the ghost is voiced by Chris Lang, and you can tell.
Would you like a glass of milk, Ghost?
Yes, I would. Do you have any biscuits?
Yes, of course.
In the end, Tiger comes to visit Kipper, and he finds the ghost very scary, and that gives the ghost a boost of confidence. The nest. Kipper and Tiger find a baby bird, and they bring the baby bird back up to its nest, and then they decide that they should make a nest of their own. I'm mainly bringing this episode up because I really love trees in the Kipper world. Something about the coloring, this sort of soft watercolory style, looks really beautiful. And Kipper doesn't have much in an environment. There's not a ton of background, so whenever we see a tree, it's always very exciting. And also the idea of being in a tree very high up is cool. There's an episode called The Lost Mug, where Arnold loses his sippy cup. And so Kipper, Pig, and Arnold are like walking through the woods trying to find the sippy cup. And that's a standout episode to me because there's so much green. Like, we really illustrated the forest, which is uncommon for Kipper. The magic lamp. Kipper finds a bike headlamp and he brings it over to Tiger. Tiger is trying to remove the wallpaper from his walls, and Kipper wishes for something exciting to happen. Never a smart thing to wish for. Then they peel back some wallpaper and find a secret door, and they start walking up this endless staircase before one of them wishes for the staircase to end, and they realize that the headlamp is granting wishes. So then they wish to go on a roller coaster, which takes them to a planet that has a dragon on it. They get very scared and wish to go back home. Arnold's balloon trip. Kipper, Tiger, Pig, and Arnold have gone to the fair, and they all have balloons and lollipops. But Arnold's balloon is too big for him, so he starts to fly away, and he lands on a candy mountain in the sky. And it's all like pastel pink cotton candy gumdrops. Fantastic. And so then Arnold is just like crawling around in this magical candy mountain. Meanwhile, Pig, Kipper, and Tiger are panicking, so they tie a bunch of balloons to a park bench, and they fly up to the Candy Mountain, and they're able to bring him back down to the ground. The Magic Act. Kipper finds a book about magic tricks in his closet, so he puts on a magic show, and as part of the show, he makes Arnold disappear. He built like a box that has a lever, and you crank the lever and then the bottom of the box opens, so then whatever is in the box falls to the little curtained area beneath the box. So when you open the box back up, it looks like the thing is gone, but really it's just underneath the box. While Arnold is a living thing who can crawl around, so he crawls out from under the box, and when they open the box back up, Arnold is gone. And so now everyone thinks that Kipper actually made Arnold disappear. They're eating biscuits and wondering if Arnold is okay when Arnold crawls out from behind the couch cushions. Tiger's cold. Tiger is pretending to be sick so that Kipper will take care of him and dote on his every need. So he requests a complicated sandwich and a hot water bottle. Kipper is, of course, being very nice and accommodating, but at a certain point, Kipper realizes, oh, Tiger is just faking. So then he goes and gets Pig and Arnold, who were playing ambulance, so they're all dressed up like doctors, and they come and scare Tiger into admitting that he's fine. The mouse. There is a mouse living in Kipper's house. The mouse takes all of Kipper's cornflakes into his toy box and builds like a little nest there, like a cornflake bed, throws all the toys out of his toy box. Kipper can't figure out what's happening until he finally finds the mouse, and this is a talking mouse. She's also a girl, which is exciting. And so the mouse and Kipper come to a sort of understanding. Mouse isn't a main character, but she is in 3 more episodes. So hide and seek, where Mouse and Kipper are playing hide and seek, but it turns out that Mouse can't count to 10. So Kipper teaches her how to count to 10. Cousins, where Mouse's 2 cousins come to stay with Kipper, but they're very messy and loud. And The Key, where Kipper finds the key to his clockwork mouse, the kind where you wind it up and it runs. Mouse is sort of upset and jealous of this clockwork mouse, so she tries to sabotage it by stealing the key, but then she realizes it's very fun to ride on the clockwork mouse. Pig's shop. Pig has set up a candy shop that he is running with Arnold, and he offers a free taste testing, but he is the one doing the taste testing.
Would you like a free tasting?
Oh, yes, please.
I'll do the tasting. No, Arnold, they're for the customers. Next.
Kipper wants to buy some candy, but he doesn't have any money, and Pig agrees to trade conkers for a gobstopper. A conker is like a seed from a chestnut tree, and there's a game where you put a conker on a string and try and smash your opponent's conker. So Kipper tries to collect a bunch of conkers, and then Tiger comes over and he has a new champion conker. And so they play conkers, and Tiger wins every time. Then Kipper goes to trade Pig the conkers, but it turns out that Tiger has already done that trade, and his champion conker is actually just a gobstopper. Jake's friend. Jake has an invisible friend named Wilbur, and his friends are sort of playing along with it. Kipper ends up pushing Wilbur on the swings, but then Pig sits on that swing.
Kipper, make him stop.
Get off, Pig. You've sat on Wilbur.
Oh, sorry.
Make him stop. Then Kipper, Jake, and Tiger go to have ice cream sodas, and they give one to Wilbur, and he drinks it. Ooh. Hedgehog watch. Tiger and Kipper are having a sleepover, and they're on the lookout for hedgehogs. Kipper has an extremely 90s desktop computer that he uses to print out their hedgehog watch sheet. They also set up a camera in the window. But every time the hedgehog appears, the two of them are distracted with something else. At some point, the hedgehog comes into Kipper's house, and they still don't find it. I just love the whole concept of this episode of, like, we're gonna have a sleepover to look for hedgehogs. Living in the moment. No phones in sight. No hedgehogs in sight either, because they're bad at looking for them. The costume party. Tiger is hosting a costume party, and no one is allowed to show up as a pirate. So Kipper has to figure out what his costume is going to be. He tries on his old Indian chief costume, which I did not remember. Didn't age amazingly. He decides he's instead going to rent a costume from a costume shop. He tries on a couple options. None of them are good, except for the pirate costume, which he's not allowed to do. So he goes home and ends up dressing as a superhero. He has like a mask, and he ties his blanket around his shoulders. At the costume party, Jake shows up late, but he is dressed as a fairy princess, so he wins the contest. The purple park monster. Tiger and Pig were going to play monster hunting, and so Kipper also gets involved. There's a lot of crawling around in the tall grass. But then Tiger and Kipper see an actual purple monster, and they freak out.
Run, Pig, run!
There's a monster in the park!
There's a monster in the park! It turns out that the monster is just Arnold in a costume.
You were very good, Arnold. You were ever such a good monster.
Missing tape mystery. They're all having a birthday party for Arnold, and Pig has gotten Arnold a cassette player. But when they open it up, the tape is gone. So then we have to walk through the events of the day to figure out where the tape went. Tiger puts on a sheriff's hat, and he's sort of leading the investigation. But then it turns out that the tape is in the hat, and it's like unclear as to how it got there. But now that they have the tape, they are able to play musical chairs. There's a point in this episode where they go bum bum ba bum, boom body boom, ding a ling a ling.
Bum bum ba bum.
Boom, body, boom. Ding-a-ling-a-ling.
I thought that was more prevalent throughout the episode. They do it like one time, but it must have really left an impression because we sing that sometimes. So that's some episodes. I tried to keep it limited to just episodes that I'm really fond of, but that still ended up being like 20-something episodes. Another thing that I'm very nostalgic for is the Kipper page on the Hit Entertainment website. I was able to find it saved on Flashpoint, the Flash game archive. The page shows Kipper and his friends sitting on Big Hill, and you can look at character bios for each of them. There is also a game where you can create an obstacle course for Rolly the hamster. Sort of like a Rube Goldberg machine style game. And then nothing else was loading. There's supposed to be a couple other bits of the website. I wasn't able to get them to work. I did also try the Wayback Machine, but on the Wayback Machine, the whole thing just crashed. Like the Kipper page on the Wayback Machine would just take me to an error page on Mattel's website. because in 2012, Mattel bought out Hit Entertainment, so they are now kind of the rights holder. There was also a matching game on the Nick Jr. website, which I don't remember ever playing. It seems kind of lame. Mick Inkpen also created a board book series called Wibbly Pig. And in 2009, Wibbly Pig got a TV adaptation. There were 26 episodes. They aired on CBeebies in the UK and PBS Kids Sprout in the US. Wibbly looks very much like Arnold, but unlike Arnold, he does talk. The show stars Wibbly Pig doing sort of slice of life, everyday child activities. And there's also a narrator who is unseen, but also played by a child. And they sort of talk to each other. It's a very different vibe than Kipper. It's higher energy. The use of child actors gives it a very different energy. But it looks cute. Then, somewhat recently in 2019, there was a live theater show called Kipper's Snowy Day. It was by a company called Slot Machine Theater, and it was their Christmas production. In the show, it's very snowy, there's a snowstorm, and Arnold gets lost, and they also do some Christmas celebrations. The show uses puppetry for all of the characters, which is kind of funny because there's like 3 people operating one Kipper, and the stage itself is very simple. The back of the stage is an entirely open book with blank pages, which allows them to use it as a screen upon which they project things. For example, the violent storm is expressed by just an animated scribble rushing about all over this book backdrop. They also play with scale, so they use tiny puppets at the top of the hill to make the characters look very distant. This is the first stage adaptation of Kipper. Mick Inkpen said he had been approached about stage adaptations of Kipper previously, even before the BAFTA-winning animation of the series, but only when Slot Machine came along did he feel he'd found the right match. The show looks cute, there's not a ton of documentation of it, and I do feel like puppetry requires a suspension of disbelief that's different when you're watching a camera recording of it. Like, I think if I was actually in the room with the puppets, I would be able to get more into it. It's also hard for me to get into the voice acting because I'm very attached to Martin Clunes and Chris Lang. So hearing just some guy do Kipper.
It's Christmas Eve! Oh, I love Christmas Eve!
I'm not into it. There's also multiple songs in the show, which I also don't know how I feel about. I don't think of Kipper as like a musical series. But I think when you're doing live theater for children, it makes sense to put songs in there. Kids like songs. I'd love to hear from anyone who has seen this show. Was it cute? Were the kids all into it? Nowadays, Mick Inkpen is semi-retired, but he has started publishing books with his daughter, Chloe Inkpen. Chloe came to live at home for a year after finishing at Glasgow School of Art, and she suggested working on something together. I was wary, but found it worked well as we both had the same thoughts and capabilities. We get together and kick ideas around. One of us will write the text and the other corrects it, and we both redraft it. Chloe gets the slog of illustrating it, and then we both organize the layout together, the words and pictures. They've created a series called Zoe and Bean, Mrs. Black Hat, and Fred. Also noteworthy is that Chloe Inkpen has a website. Chloe, if you're watching this, you can't ever change your name. Inkpen is such a good name for an artist. I'm so jealous. So that's the story of Kipper the dog and Mick Inkpen, with a little bit of Nick Butterworth thrown in there. I hope you enjoyed. This series is very special to me, so I was excited to talk about it. If you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe. I am Sarah Seraph on all social media, even if I don't post much. And as always, all of the sources I use are linked in a Google Doc in the description. And I don't know how to end a YouTube video, so bye!